Hey, welcome to Conversations, a podcast where we seek out intelligent voices, voices that have been pushed to the fringes or have been smeared or ignored. We try to understand if in fact they have valuable contributions to give, and we do this by implementing some simple principles. Participants agree on some basic rules of conversation, but most importantly, they must see the humanity in each other. At a time when polarization is only increasing, while Western civilization is at serious threat of collapse, we believe these conversations are more important now than ever before. We hope you enjoy, but most importantly, we hope you take it upon yourself to have some of these conversations. Well, let's begin. So, welcome to the very first episode of Conversations. My name is Tareq Haddad, formerly a journalist at Newsweek. I resigned several weeks ago after a very important story about the Chemical Weapons Board of the United Nations, the OPCW. There was evidence of tampering of chemical weapons reports that essentially falsely accused Bashar al-Assad's government of using chemical weapons. Once I was prevented from writing about this story, I uncovered some deep corruption at Newsweek, which is all available on a piece on my website, which is tareqhaddad.com. So if you're interested, please have a read there. But today we're having a conversation with Rico Brouwer. Rico's a podcaster and journalist in the Netherlands. He was formerly with the Pirate Party. But Rico is very important to me personally because he inspired this podcast, and he gave me a lot of hope in a very, very dark time in our civilization. So I'm hoping to carry forward the hope that he's given me, and hopefully keep spreading the truth as he's been doing with his podcast. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. So with me is Rico Brouwer in the Netherlands, I believe, and we'll get into all of these things very, very soon. Just to explain to you, Rico, and to kind of explain to people that will be watching, just kind of why I decided to have my first podcast with yourself, and some of the kind of ideas for the podcast. So just to put everything into a little bit of context, I spoke to you personally and also kind of in society. Seemed like a very chaotic time, very crazy time. I resigned my job from Newsweek and all this kind of stuff. And then we see in the world situation, there's many, many different, scary things going on, or especially from freedom of speech or society. But at the same time, I had this very kind of strange feeling. I was feeling very, very, very optimistic about everything. Because of people like you, first of all, and just everyone else that, contacted me. I had, many different journalists from different countries that wanted to talk to me and blah, blah. Actually, the first few days I had like a big headache, and I didn't know what to do because I had 40, 50 people I wanted to speak to. And I thought, oh, this is really important. This will be amazing. Oh, this will lead to something. And I was like, oh, what do I do? So I thought...
Following the news that you left Newsweek.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But anyway, so when I had the conversation with you and some of the others there, I had this very strange feeling of, oh, I didn't know this person that I was speaking to. And, I had this strange feeling of, oh, I'd really like to have the conversation to understand, we talked a lot about me, and I've been talking a lot about myself recently, but I guess I'm a journalist. I want to speak to the other people. So I guess, the main idea is to try and speak to as many of the people that I've spoken to or, had contact with. I think everyone has interesting aspects to bring to the story. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention, sorry for my big spiel at the beginning. Other thing I wanted to mention, like I said, there was all this tumultuous and scary and dark times going on. But in your podcast, I had this kind of amazing feeling, and it was a feeling of hope. But it was very symbolic of how it started with the candle. So maybe you could actually want to explain your podcast quickly and the idea of the candle. And
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me. And You sent me, what was it yesterday? An email saying, "Oh, I'm going to start my podcast, and I want you to be the first guest." And I was, yes, because not to be in this podcast, but to have you deciding to take that path. And also, you talked to Rvoji Moric, who was another one, a guest that I had on my show.
Yeah, and we've had a discussion since.
I saw that.
Oh yeah,
That was so cool. I see you talking to that podcaster from Kazakhstan, but okay, this is the way forward for journalism internationally.
Yeah.
So I couldn't stop laughing when that happened.
That's great.
So you were asking about my Potkaars initiative. So what I typically do is explain that word, because Potkaars is not a Dutch word, and I brought the prop. So pot would be a pot, right? This is a pot, and kaars is candle. So Potkaars is pot with candle.
Great.
And I would light one at the start of a show, and somebody actually printed a 3D thingy for me because this is my logo. It's a mic with a little flame, and it's supposed to symbolize hope. Now, why did I do that? I started making I'm not a journalist by profession. Right? I'm an IT specialist by profession. I've worked in ICT for 20, 30 years until I decided to do politics for a little while. Well, that didn't work. And then, but I saw it up close, and I thought, well, maybe it's not through politics that we can improve things as society, but that fourth power, the fourth estate, like journalism, and that can be us as well. As just civilians. You don't have to be trained as a journalist. So I decided, let's give it a go. I'm a journalist. And I started making, it's not a protected profession, right? Just have at it. And somebody asked me to interview him for a channel called Café Weltschmerz. And there's plenty of interviews online that you can find with me there. And it's got a black backdrop. And the name, it's a German word, Weltschmerz, and it means pain of the world. But that's not why I'm doing this. I don't want to talk about what's wrong. Everything's wrong. Everything's falling apart. Ever since 2008, I've been reading and everything, watching podcasts, making myself depressed, getting all that knowledge. I'm not here to amplify the pain of the world. I want to amplify a message of hope. So how do we get out of this? So as a reaction maybe to Weltschmerz formula, I thought, well, let's make happy podcast then. Messages of hope, talk to people who actually do something, get out of the couch and be more, in a positive way. So you leaving Newsweek after you did your research, after you did your journalistic task and you came up with a good story and said, well, this is what went on in Douma, Syria. This is what Bellingcat's actually been doing. And I want to report on that because that is the news. And you're not getting that published. And then deciding, well, I'm going to choose my journalistic profession over the job at Newsweek. That is so cool. So that made me reach out to you and go, oh, here's a guy making a little flame for himself. Let's talk to him.
Yeah.
So that's my rationale behind this podcast.
Oh, that's great. Well, I mean, I couldn't have imagined a more perfect way to, because like you said, that whole experience was very kind of moving for me. And I did feel a sense of exactly kind of what you described, of that feeling of hope in this, very, very dark time. And then it was also, more interesting for me as well, also because what was interesting about the podcast is that it was released on New Year's Eve. Yeah. And so for me, before I was doing journalism, and I had 2 years where I was writing a book about radicalization between left and right, because I was feeling that there was a big problem. But I wanted to write a fiction novel. I didn't want to write, this is my philosophy, you should believe what I think. I wanted to do kind of more like Dostoevsky type of thing, where you write a story, you can read the story and just enjoy, or if you want to go and understand the philosophy, you can understand the philosophy this way. But anyway, in this process, I started to learn a lot about symbolism and imagery, and when I did the podcast with you, it was the symbolism of the podcast was like so true on many different levels. Of it was like for me, it was at New Year's Eve is like the darkest point of the year, and it's like physically, like winter, it's cold, it's the day is the shortest. Yeah. And it's the exact same message of many religions of it's like this, the star on the Christmas tree, or like the lighting of the candle in the Jewish tradition, or something like,
Well, okay, I may be going over the top a little bit, but let me get into that a little further then.
Sure.
Because don't get me wrong, I'm very angry about everything that you see happening around you. And when I see Mike Pence tweeting today even about United States killing Soleimani, the Iranian general, and pretty much everything going to crap in the Middle East now very fast. And he's even referring to 911. So we're back to that, right?
Yeah.
And that's where all the most of the crap that we're in today started. The reason that I came up with this idea mid-December, so let's invite a lot of people in here and have a cozy, friendly couch conversation in my home, and it resonated. So I'm very happy to hear you say it resonates. So I'm very proud of that. But and a lot of people accepted, and but the reason that I did it is also to make a statement to national television in the Netherlands, where there's all these kind of fuzzy, feel-good stuff without any content, or without explaining the real news. So what I wanted to do is get people like you on this proverbial couch in my house and talk about the real stuff that's going on, and still smiling, still laughing, have a little candle burning. It should be on national television. It should be on national television in UK, where you are, in the Netherlands, where I am, and it isn't anywhere. And the only place where we can get our news is on internet. Well, let's use that then.
Exactly.
And
I think
it is dark, but I know there's people. So this is where I'm going over the top, but bear with me for a while. I know there's people that are alone on New Year's Eve. There's people alone with Christmas. What are they going to do? Sit behind the computer and feeling all depressed? So they could also tune into the Dutch television and say, well, that's not helping. Maybe this is helping. And if I do this, maybe it motivates people to get out of their own proverbial couch and do stuff. So you going, you've inspired me. That's very good, because you're a hero for what you did with Newsweek. You're a genuine, experienced reporter, journalist. I'm not, but you take your motivation from my little candle. Mission accomplished. So
yeah. Well, I mean, so I guess I'll cut straight to the point. But one of the things you inspired me to do is actually, funnily enough, I bought a candle. Just this morning, I ran to the shop. And so my idea is that I very like the idea of, to start the podcast, you have the candle burning. It's very similar to the idea of, sitting around a fire, something like that. But just the idea is, when you light the candle, you speak to the person as honestly as you can, and you just treat them like a human being. Because one thing I've noticed about the radicalization is that, we've lost this ability to speak to someone that's opposing viewpoints or whatever. And I'm not original in saying this. Many people have started to point out this issue, that, left and right can't talk to each other and that kind of thing. So that's the basic idea, is just, I'm not stealing your tradition. I want to continue your tradition. And hopefully many other people will kind of decide to say, we're going to start a podcast. We'll light a candle, and we're going to speak truthfully to each other, and as human beings, which I think is missing. So I will get started, and then we'll go.
I couldn't have imagined. Now, the funny thing is, anecdotal. So when this whole thing for me, I was just average Joe until 2007, 2008. When the financial crisis hit. I had my daytime job and a wife and a baby just in, and a mortgage. And then the financial world fell apart. And I went, I feel cheated. My image of the world isn't what I thought it was. And I went back to school and educated myself, and then decided to not want to sit idly by and watch it going to crap even further. So let's try fix it. And if the power is with government, the ultimate power is with your elected representatives, well, let's give it a go then. So I became politically active, and the party that I found is what's closest to my heart. is what Rick Valkvinge started in 2006, which is Pirate Party. So I decided to join those guys.
Oh, the Pirate Party. Okay, interesting.
And I talked to Marketa Gregorova, also the 30th, before I got you on, who is now a member of European Parliament from the Czech Republic. So, you really want to see that, because she calls the European Parliament what's going on there, that she's been there now for 9 months. It's basically a theater.
Yeah.
But you have to hear it in context, so I'm taking just that word out, but she has a very thorough analysis of how that thing is functioning. But I wanted to say, you say, well, you're not stealing the concept. Well, one of the basic founding principles of Pirate Party is that we should stop copywriting ideas and just taking what's cool and spreading it. So the more candles, the better. So good for you.
Great. That's very interesting what you said about the financial crash and things like that, because that was also very instrumental in me starting my journalism career. Obviously, at slightly different points in our adulthood, I guess. I was probably a lot younger. I was when the financial crash started. I just started university, but I had a very similar feeling of, I grew up in the age of the internet, and before I went to university and my whole childhood, it was, and I think this is common amongst many people my age, is that the world felt very, very hopeful. The internet made it feel like we're going to do anything. And this is before Facebook and YouTube and all of these things, but it was just beginning, and it felt like, my life is going to be so filled and I will be able to do whatever I want. I don't have any worries. And then as I start university, financial crash. So thankfully I wasn't working at the time of the financial crash, and I was still receiving help from my parents. But I studied finance, funnily enough, at university. So a lot of my professors actually amazingly decided to say, if you want to learn the finance that we want to teach you, we have the lectures online from previous years, you can do this, but what we're going to do in the lectures is just follow what's happening week by week, because every single week was changing. So, I had several professors did this, and they just, discussed. So I got a very technical understanding of, it was so much better than my normal financial education, I think, because when I started to work in finance, I didn't like it very much. But yeah, anyway, so after
the crisis, that crisis happening was actually good for your education. You chose a profession or something you wanted to learn. The curriculum wasn't all that satisfactory. Then the crisis hit, and this professor started teaching you real stuff. That's
sure. I mean, to be 100% accurate, I still wasn't. When I was doing my finance degree, I wasn't like, oh, I love finance. I had other reasons. I went to study in the United States, for example, because I was completely and stupidly in love with basketball. So I did a finance degree to make my parents happy, essentially. Please let me go to America. I love basketball, but
but that is the thing. You're way younger. I'm 49 now.
Okay.
One of the reasons that I chose a career, it wasn't even by choice, but we all want to make our parents happy.
Yeah.
So the financial crisis was what I needed to get out of my chair and start doing where my heart is. I'm a musician now. I'm a journalist now. This is way more fun.
Yeah.
Than what I did before.
Great.
So you're younger.
Yeah. I'm 29.
Yeah, oh man, that's so cool.
Yeah, thank you.
I wish I took that path when I was 20, but it took me. I'm slower, I guess.
No, but I think you're there now. You're doing, and you wouldn't be the same person that you are right now without having those experiences.
That's true.
And funnily, what I experienced in the last few weeks is that there's many aspects of my life that I thought were irrelevant, and then as this was happening, it's like all the pieces came together at the same time. So things that I thought would never be related to this, or sometimes I met someone 5-10 years ago, and now it's like, oh, actually, they can contribute to this in a very interesting way. Just connections I've made, and so it's, I think everyone will have those types of experiences, if where the whole history will come together and it will make you who you are. But yeah, I mean, that was my main idea of when I started the podcast with you, and I want to talk about that too. You had some amazing guests, and I would like to, hear about your experience about that. But the one thing I discussed is I didn't know you very well. So what was your kind of journey from, I guess, the financial crisis to where you are now with the podcast? How's everything going, and what's the journey?
Yeah, so I got married in 2007 with my now wife, who has been my girlfriend for a long time before that. And we just bought a house, and financial crisis. And the depressing part about that was that I lost control. So I'm an IT person. My systems don't break. Everything's redundant because I do not like to get called at night to fix something. When I build something, it doesn't break. I like redundancy, just for my own night rest, basically. So then financial crash hits, and all securities that I thought I had were out the window. Yeah, and the world was falling apart, even more so than 9/11, because that also shook me up. But that was still far away. That was New York, or World Trade Center, and the bad guys are supposed to be from I don't know, Middle East, Saudi Arabia, or somewhere there. And but that was all distant. 2008 crisis was here in my house, so my security was gone, and it was very depressing. And I decided that I wanted that control back, just like an IT person wants to understand what's happening so he can build his redundancy again. And I started paying off my mortgage and all the other contingency plans that came up. I was scared. So it was fear, and that won over all the other emotions at that time. I was depressed. I was reading. I'm the guy at night trying to make sense of the world and listening to podcasts when I'm driving to work. I was a teacher then, so I had many hours in the car listening to MP3s of people that were ahead of me, listening to these kinds of shows. And I did that for a couple of years. Max Keizer, Zero Hedge, Jim Rickards, a Dutch historian, Erik Mekking, and I actually visited him in his house in that time. Willem Middelkoop is another Dutch journalist. Those were the people that come to mind now that educated me with their work. And then, at a certain point, I decided to want to do something. But who am I? First of all, I lack ego. So I'm just the IT person sitting behind a computer. I don't do cameras. So if the power is with politics, I'm going to do politics, but not myself. So who's a cool politician then? And I decided to support Pirate Party, support their front runner. And then by doing that, and I ended up organizing the election campaign. Yeah, we lost, so I wasn't very good apparently. But I was also number 3 on that list, on the electoral list. And by force, not by ambition, I learned, I can actually do this. So I was on stage and I had cameras pointed on me. And that's where I discovered that I can actually do that. So, okay, if that's a skill that I have, I didn't know I had it. Well, let's put it to use then. So, and I met a musician, Harry Loco, who was also my guest, but we talk Dutch, so you can't understand that when you see that on the New Year's Eve podcast. But Harry Loco, he's the one remaining hippie. So he does his guitar songs from the Netherlands, and he's been to Woodstock 50th anniversary.
I think I saw a picture on the social media. Was that him? Was he wearing like a tie-dye shirt?
Yeah.
I think I'll listen to the music.
I was at this political debate thing, and I was the politician wearing my suit, and he was happily playing his guitar music, and he was making more of an impression than I was. Oh fuck! So I ever since 2008 I started studying. I decided to go politics, but I was all wrong. I should have just bought a guitar. But I actually did that after losing the elections. I started to play the guitar, started to learn how to sing, and I decided I wanted to be a musician.
Oh, amazing.
The thing is, I cannot make that product. I cannot market it, and that is an ego thing. I don't know how to sell it. I don't know how to make it big. I can
Well,
write songs and I can play them, but that's something I lack. But I can't do it as a journalist.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided to. Well, the reason I started this podcast thing is what's happening in Spain, or what was happening in Spain in 2008. So the Catalans had their referendum, and I really like self-determination. And if you have your vote, be it Brexit or be it in Catalonia, wanted to have more independence from Spain, if the people decide to self-determine a course, you must follow it, regardless of the consequences. And you need to do it the way Canada did it with Quebec. Take it seriously. And have the dialogue and say, well, if this ultimately is what you want to do, then we're going to do it. But Spain repressed it through those, not just the leaders, but even the Speaker of the House in jail. And well, if Spain is going to do that, then that's a rogue state. But European Union is going to allow it. If EU is going to allow it, then the Netherlands is in on it as well. And every other European Union member state is in on it as well. So for me, what's happening in Catalonia is pivotal to the decline of European Union. European Union is falling apart in Spain if they don't fix that properly. So I decided to go there to Barcelona, to their Diada on September 11, 2008, and create a podcast out of that one. So that made me decide, let's do some investigative stuff and talk about it.
Great.
So you're in London. I haven't decided yet, but there's a hearing end February.
Yeah. For Julian Assange.
Where Julian Assange might be on European soil for the last time until he's locked away forever, until he dies in the United States. That is of the same magnitude as or even bigger as what's happening in Spain. So I might look you up late February.
Please, I will be happy to, if you come, I'll be happy to meet you. And
these things, if we don't fix them now,
yes.
Oh man, democracy and free press is falling apart now as we speak. But at the same time, you talked about internet having promise. Well, here we are talking.
Yeah,
right? It's a Saturday morning, two journalists happily chatting about that and finding hope in it as well.
Yeah,
not all is lost. We just need to go to Catalonia and need to go to Belmarsh prison to support Assange.
Yeah, absolutely, and and some of the people I'd like to have conversations with in the future will be people related to Assange. I've spoken to some of his lawyers in the past. Actually, like 2 weeks before I resigned from Newsweek, I was already talking to his lawyers about doing a story, and I had some certain ideas. It's interesting actually, now that I won't be at Newsweek, I can actually write that story probably much more honestly, because I knew in the back of my head there were certain details that I can't really say this in Newsweek.
So why? This is what I have never worked for an outlet like that, and I might in the future, but why would you self-censor, and what makes you not write certain words because you know that they're not going to be in print? So who's limiting you there?
Sure. I mean, you have to think, so obviously the words that you write on a page will go to someone to read, and that can be an editor, or that even with a friend, it's the same idea, and they will perceive it in a certain way, or they will have their opinion about it, whatever. And I think what happens is that there's certain ideas that slowly just, you can't discuss them more and more. And I think it just comes from a simple thing of, well, I'm not entirely sure why it happens, but essentially you get certain topics where, and I guess it's very related to the idea of conspiracy theory. And there's people that have talked about this and studied this a lot in terms of, conspiracy theory was a made up word to discredit people that try to give something different to the official story. And it was used to undermine people. And sometimes, those people were correct, as history shows with, the Bay of Pigs, or, there's lots of examples in history. But so I think what happens is, certain things can't get discussed, but what happens is, as the story develops and there's more information coming, it becomes, even though you think I want to go back and, it becomes very hard to to touch that subject. I'll give you an example, like in specific terms with Julian Assange. So my understanding, and I followed, the financial crash was very influential. The Iraq War was very influential. But also for me, like Edward Snowden was hugely influential. The whole thing with him happened like almost immediately when I finished my journalism career. It was like, strange timing. And I don't know if you saw the movie by Laura Poitras. Yeah.
Actually, I did a review in theater, Movies That Matter. They asked me as a pirate to comment on the movie. So yeah.
Oh, great. Sorry, my internet's a little bit okay, but I think we're fine. But yeah, I mean that movie was very instrumental for me. I forgot where I was going with this. So with Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. So as I was
you'll catch it. Let me say something about Snowden, because it's 2013, 2014. Snowden comes forward and delivers his story with Glenn Greenwald.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just like you with your candle, I'm sitting at home going, yes,
yeah.
And NSA is doing this. They're lying to Congress about it. But here's someone by himself that decides, well, hold my beer. I'm going to fix this anyway, regardless of the consequences. Well, so that's tremendously hopeful.
Yeah.
But still, I did not become an activist or a journalist or whatever. I still sat on my proverbial couch just reading the internet and trying to make sense of things until that plane of Evo Morales was downed over Europe when he was flying back home to South America. So he was in Moscow and he jokingly said, I might take Edward Snowden with me. And then the airspace was closed over Spain. And his plane was made to land in Austria and mandatorily searched if Snowden wasn't on board. And no one objected to that. Mm-hmm. And all these European states closed their airspace, and no one, even my government, did not object to that.
Mm-hmm.
That made me go out of my house and figure out how I'm going to help fix the world, because this cannot be. We cannot allow this to happen.
Yeah, and I guess that's a very interesting thing, because it's, the feeling I felt when I came on your podcast. You had, and we'll discuss this soon. We had, John Kiriakou and a range of interesting guests, and I had the feeling of, I'm not very brave. People were telling me, oh, I'm brave and, well done, blah, blah, blah. But, there's people, and I think what actually happens is, people like Edward Snowden or Julian Assange, they've done very brave things. And I think it makes domino effect for other people, in that other people now are saying, no, we need to speak the truth. So, I think, let's continue that domino chain, and hopefully people that watch this conversation will think, okay, because of this conversation, I will now try to speak the truth in my life. But yeah, ultimately, people like Assange and Snowden. So with going back to Julian Assange, so I was following the situation very closely, all of the news, and I was noticing how, like I'm with most stories with foreign affairs, I notice how certain stories get not manipulated, but certain details get left out, or what sometimes happens is useful parts of the story don't get investigated properly. So I'm sure you're aware there's when the emails in 2016, the DNC with Hillary Clinton were released. I was following this story very closely, and obviously, like I said, Snowden was very important to me. So I really took the time and read all of the documents by myself, and everything. My strong feeling was that the leaks immediately, it wasn't a Russian hack. This was very obviously clearly propaganda. I think there's a video with Seymour Hersh. I'm sure you know who he is. Seymour Hersh with Jeremy Scahill of The Intercept. And it's funny, it's only like a 30-second conversation, but it was the exact feeling I felt of, there was a press statement that 19 agencies 19 intelligence agencies of the United States said that this hack came from Russia. And it was so ridiculous because you see Seymour Hersh, who's like knows exactly the intelligence community very well and has very deep connections. And you just see him, he just like starts to laugh because 19 intelligence agencies says that he was the hack. So the Air Force, the Coast Guard, the like electric, yeah. So they all think that Julian Assange is, and then this statement is changed. You know, it's retracted later on, and or you know, you never hear about this again. It's just one of those things. It's a strong, you know, pointing of the finger, and then it's later quietly removed from the public sight when, you know, as more and more changing of the information takes place. But one thing that I, you know, realized with Snowden is that the source of the leaks was very much likely to be within the Democratic Party itself.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a Russian hack. And we've seen this in recent weeks. I think that's why there's signs for hope, is that many people in America are starting to realize that this whole Russia theory is essentially made up by the Democrats to essentially it's their way of not dealing with the corruption that was in their party. It was saying, oh, we got hacked by the Russians, we need to stand up to this. But it's actually the leaks emails, they showed some very damaging things about the Democratic Party. For example, Hillary Clinton was breaking election laws by working with the DNC to undermine Bernie Sanders. You know, the speeches that she gave to Wall Street where she said, I will have one position, you know, to the private, you know, to the bankers, and I will have a public position to the public. And you know, there was
okay. I'm so with you. So yeah, let's do a few examples here. So yeah, Hillary Clinton kind of stole the DNC election, the Democratic Party elections from Bernie Sanders, and that was there was I don't know if it's a criminal act. That's for the United States to decide, but it definitely wasn't an ethical thing to do. And then attention from that fraud that Hillary Clinton did with the DNC. Attention was diverted away from that by saying, oh, it's the Russians. Now, that doesn't make the Russians good. I mean, as far as I know, they actually did interfere in United States elections infrastructure by hacking a company that make voting computers and voting computer software. Now, Reality is her first name, Winner is her last name, is actually in jail because she released that to the press as a whistleblower. So, as far as I know, there's documented evidence that Russians actually did interfere in United States elections. But that was not the topic. That's also an important topic. The topic here was that Clinton stole the election from Bernie Sanders. Another important thing is that Bernie Sanders said, okay, and he's gonna support Clinton there. So the one person that actually made a statement, as far as I know, is Tulsi Gabbard, who ran the DNC campaign at that time, and she's now running for president. Ah, what a surprise! Clinton calls her a Russian stooge, or Russian asset, or whatever.
The only person with any backbone in the whole.
There you go. And well, I don't know Gabbard, and I don't know. I've stopped trusting politicians. That's. But if I were to vote, I would. Well, Gabbard. I liked Gabbard before she ran, so that's. Another thing is what's happening with the Iranian general that was just killed in Iraq. So yeah, I don't know about that guy. Might be a bad guy. I don't know. United States killed somebody in Iraq and is bragging about it. Their president, Donald Trump, is raising a flag in his Twitter saying, oh, we killed somebody. Excuse me, they killed somebody in a different country and are bragging about it? Yeah. What's the United States doing in Iraq in the first place? There were no weapons of mass destruction. And what's their business killing Iranian generals in a foreign country? Exactly. So is anybody opposing this in United Nations or in NATO? I'm still waiting for that one. My Minister of Foreign Affairs just tweeted right now, and I'm amplifying the Donald Trump. So now I'm getting agitated. The Donald Trump story, saying, the Iranian general is actually a bad guy, and United States is killing somebody outside of law.
It's an extrajudicial killing, which has been happening in the United States for a long time. But
yeah,
I think
when are we going to stop that thing?
Exactly.
So I have another one, last one. So
Please.
there's the letters of impeachment that are now politicized.
Yeah.
So the House has made letters of impeachment, but they're not being sent to the Senate. They're just having that hang as an envelope over Trump. If you're going to take your constitutional process of impeachment seriously, hand them over and let that process run its course. Don't politicize it.
And well,
but what's happening there is that Trump allegedly put his power. He abused his power over the president of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in walks the video clip with Joe Biden that says, "Well, call him." When he was asked why he was trying to get his son out of the predicament that he was in. So Joe Biden wanted the prosecution of his son, Hunter Biden, to stop, and actually abused his power by withholding funds to Ukraine. So there is a presidential candidate, Joe Biden, who actually did bad stuff, and they're now taking that and imposing that on Trump. I don't like Trump any more than any of the other politicians, but Biden, his wrong behavior is documented. We know and that's way worse than what Trump ever did with Ukraine. Right? So we're letting ourselves be diverted away from the real issue here, which is the criminal behavior of Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, the DNC. Yeah, and now Trump is killing people in Iraq just as bad, but focus on the particular topic and don't be diverted away when they say, oh, it's the Russians. Well, we can talk about Russians also, but we're now talking about Clinton, Biden, the killing of Soleimani, and so on.
Yeah,
Thanks.
And I think just to add even something more ridiculous to this whole situation, and it shows, and I think everything we're talking about is like the danger, the threat of America is in decline. As an empire, and I talked about this with Jorge. America is acting like an empire in decline, and I think he mentioned it in the podcast with you as well. They're acting like they're causing devastation all around them, and they're continuing to break international law, while the other powers in the world are now, and this is seemingly some positive signs that actually seems like, even though I'm a little bit skeptical of Russia and China myself, especially China, I mean, with some scary things going on with facial monitoring and this kind of thing. But what I hear so far is that they're trying to create something where international law is respected and the sovereignty of countries are respected again, because that hasn't, for most people, this hasn't been respected in international law for a long time.
Yeah, you need to take these things apart. So what China is doing to their population is horrible with the facial recognition and the social credit score. That's a very unfree country. So that's very bad, and we need to put all focus on that where we can. And every country has their own issues. That's a major issue with China. At the same time, China is showing restraint, and Russia is showing restraint against the aggression coming out of the United States. So that's a cool. As far as I'm with you, it's a scary statement to make for a regime in both Russia and in Beijing that you don't trust. But so far as what I can see is the United States is the aggressor. I mean, they're killing people right now. So that does not make China good. I mean, I hate the way they're dealing with their people, and also I have no idea what's happening in Hong Kong. But I do not like what China. Well,
I mean. I'll keep my mouth shut a little bit about this for now, but I have some suspicions about what's going on in Hong Kong.
That's why I also didn't want to go further into that. We don't know the details there.
Yeah, but I think maybe it would be interesting for both of us to maybe discuss, find someone that has, and I think that I've seen some reporting by people that have raised some questions about what's going on in Hong Kong. But I haven't really read the reports. I can't remember who it's by. Maybe there's something in the gray zone. I'm sure that, discussing these things. I think we're lucky now that we're in an environment that there's been so much lying about so many different things, is that you actually have a big number of people, but they're all very diverse. You have certain people that focus purely on Syria. Some people focus on this thing, and everyone has their own one thing they gravitate to. So, but I think we're lucky now in a situation where there's lots of people spread out, and so for people like us, we can have conversations with lots of things and maybe try to do a bigger picture of what's going on.
The real scary thing is this. War scares everybody, scares me, but we are taking the free open internet for granted. But at the same time, it's only 2 weeks ago or a week ago that Russia concluded a test where they say, we can now close off the internet completely. So if internet is by being weaponized, at least we can get the infrastructure running from within Russia's borders. China is known for the Great Firewall of China. I'm pretty sure they can run the internet as a Chinese entity without being connected to even top level DNS domains, which is a bit technical. So if the powers that be decide that their management of information is failing, I wouldn't hold it against them to roll back parts of the free internet that we take for granted now. I don't know how to connect to you if the internet connection is gone.
Yeah. I think I don't know very much about that, but I think that's something that people. I'm sure people will be already concerned about, and hopefully building tools to try and get away from that. I think what we've seen is this pattern of government being a bit too authoritarian, and then people like the Pirate Party or like WikiLeaks invent a kind of a way to get around that. So maybe someone can create a open source internet that's...
it's being done. Kim.com is there's plenty of cool initiatives going on right now. And also, sorry to interrupt. There's so many cool things. So Chelsea Manning is in jail again. That's the person that told us about the war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. She volunteered that to WikiLeaks, but that was found out, and now she served her time, and Barack Obama granted her pardon, and she was free. Well, she was put in jail again because she didn't want to testify in front of a secret grand jury in the United States. And I lost where I want to go with this. My brain's shutting down. Will get to me.
Shall we come back and see if...
No, you carry on with talking about something. It'll come to mind again.
Okay, so the cool thing, it was the idea of Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning.
I lost my line.
It's okay. It happened.
Sorry about that.
No. So I guess maybe we can go into... actually, one thing I was going to mention quickly of how ridiculous everything was getting was we had also 2 weeks ago with the impeachment of Nancy Pelosi saying she wasn't going to... she knew that Bush lied about weapons of mass destruction and then didn't impeach, or decided not to, go push with the impeachment. And now she's criticizing Donald Trump for not going to Congress before Iran. And it's the timing of that is very funny. So it's just another one of those, flips of...
What we still don't know. So I'm disappointed in my own government. That's my own chauvinistic or nationalistic. I feel I'm a Dutch guy. I'm from the Netherlands. So if the Netherlands screws up, that hurts me more than when Boris Johnson screws up or something happens in the United States. But so this happens in the Netherlands as well. But in United States, I talked to John Kiriakou. John Kiriakou is the guy who told us that there was torturing taking place in Guantanamo Bay, the waterboarding. He is a CIA. He's the guy that told us about those wrongdoings by CIA. And John Kiriakou, also in the same podcast you were in, told me again that the reason that nobody said anything back then about the weapons of mass destruction hoax was that all of Congress was in on it. They all knew. So if they were going to make a point about that, they were going to be blaming themselves. So all of Congress knew that there were no weapons of mass destruction. But regardless, they went to war. That's the reason there was no impeachment started at that time. Where here we have a nice, clean thingy against Trump, who apparently everybody, at least in the Democratic Party, hates.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, let's try impeach him on those grounds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't know where that's going to go. I think impeachment process is politicized, and it's only going to make the divide in United States society bigger. So your book, what you started on, that describes the divide, that's going to be, oh man, there might even be civil war.
Well, actually, maybe this is an interesting thing to discuss quickly. I've had this conversation with many of my friends, but I'll share it with you, and hopefully other people listening will understand it. And some of it can be, I guess, controversial. I mean, I sometimes get a bit skeptical to say his name in public, because I know even just saying his name can sometimes have a reaction where it can be polarizing. This is how, and I guess this is part of the society that we've come now, is that, you know, you can't say certain things without automatically just one name, just someone's name can, like, you know, separate the whole society. But while I was studying this and I was reading philosophy, I got into someone called Jordan Peterson a lot. And it was kind of, I don't know if you're aware of his story or his background, or.
Yeah, well, somewhat.
Somewhat, yeah.
Carry on.
But anyway, so I became familiar with him maybe about a year or a year and a half before he was even famous. But I started to follow his work. But he wrote this scientific paper about the Big Five personality theory in the 1980s, and now this paper is now the model of understanding personality in science. And I think he's one of the most brilliant academics alive at the moment. There's several others, but and so this is not his only idea, but one of his founding ideas is this idea of five personality traits. And so as you understand those big five personality traits, you realize that left and right politically, it's not something that you decide personally. It's based on your biological personality traits, and we can discuss those more in detail. But depending on where you are, high or low, it will affect how you view the world. So me and you, if we're different in one of the personality traits, we can see one piece of news and our bodies or mentally will react to it extremely differently. And what's interesting to understand is that the left and right, it's like they've almost been from an evolutionary biology perspective. It's like they've been created to have like a counterbalance of each other. And so the personality traits that make you more likely to be left-wing get balanced, and so they have. This is so complicated, but
it's hard to retell what somebody else has researched, right?
Yeah, but no, I understand it very well, but there's so many little details to it. But anyway, so what happens is that the traits that make someone left wing, they have advantages and they have disadvantages, and the traits that make someone right wing, they have advantages and disadvantages. And they're also advantages, disadvantages from an evolutionary biology perspective. Maybe it would make some sense for you to understand. I'll say the five quickly. So there's openness, and for example, left-wing people tend to be more higher in openness. That's why artists, musicians, and these things tend to be left-wing. Like I remember the Obama election, you had all these musicians on stage and they were saying, look at us, we're so amazing, we have all these musicians. But actually it's because naturally people that are artists, musicians will be left-wing anyway. Conservative people. Anyway, so there's openness, conscientiousness. So conscientiousness is something that's more associated with right-wing traits. So it's the idea of like following through with what you start. If you say, I'm going to start a business, if you're higher in this, you're more likely to finish this project, whereas someone that's lower is going to give up after a few weeks. So again, this is not 100%, but statistically, most people that are right wing will be, or the people that are higher in this will be right wing. So we have agreeableness, conscientiousness, openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness. So agreeableness is how agreeable, like how much you like conflict, or how much you have a problem with conflict and confrontation. So if you're very agreeable, you are the type of person that someone asks you, which restaurant do you want to go? You say, oh, it's okay, you decide, I'm not sure, because you're scared to give your, emphasis. Whereas someone that's very disagreeable or assertive will be, I want to go to this restaurant, I think we're going to have a good time, let's go here. And it's not a problem for this person, and it's not even rude, but it's just their personality to be like, yeah, I like this, I want to. Another one is.
Now, hang on. How is that left-right divided then?
So this one This one is actually where it becomes interesting, is because the more disagreeable people tend to be on the fringes, and it's more like a circle. So the far left and the far right tend to be higher in disagreeableness, and so the reason for that is they are the ones that, if they have a problem with something, they are the ones that are more likely to say something first. Because if you are an agreeable
we're all
person,
we are moving now to the fringes. So
so if you are,
carry on.
If you don't like a particular situation, if you are agreeable, you will kind of continue with it for some time. Whereas if you're naturally disagreeable, you will start to say something quicker. You will voice your concerns quicker.
It's funny that you mentioned that. So I would be the guy that as a personality that says, well, I don't care about restaurant, and I actually play with that. So when I'm parking the car and I ask the other person, well, you pick whatever kind of food you choose. Yeah, but you eat meat. So I don't care. If you don't, you choose.
Yeah.
And then the person actually ended up ordering fish for me. So that's so whereas I don't care what you order for me, but it's your choice. So if I were a vegetarian and somebody said that to me, I wouldn't order meat or fish. I'd just order the vegetarian dish. But that was a nice example. Now that was in the time of when I was doing the Pirate Party campaign, where people would join, in the Netherlands at least, from the fringes. So they're very opinionated, and both left and right, because Pirate Party isn't left or right. They take the topics from either left or right if it's a good program point, but they are on the fringes. So if you're running as a front runner for a party like that, you pick a fight with everyone, because you're never doing it right. You got the fringes on the left and the fringes on the right, and they're both complaining that you're doing a wrong job. So you can never win a fight with if that's your if that's the group you're running for. So that's the reason why we didn't win in the Netherlands, and Holland is still doing that. Now, I'll let you. The other point. So there was this right-wing event in the Netherlands, I don't know, 2 years ago or a year ago, whatever. And I was worried about that fringe thing, and left opposing right, and picking a fight. So I thought, well, I consider myself left. So I sit in this leftist bubble. Let's try to see what's going on there. I'll try to be speaker there at that event, and I even went as a guitarist. So I was the Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan kind of a guy, like I'm playing my leftish songs on that right-wing event, and I actually managed to do that. So I was on stage, and Jordan Peterson was one of the speakers there.
Oh, okay.
And he's a hero to these rightish people.
Yeah.
So I saw that up close also, and I met Peterson there, and somebody introduced me to his work, because I don't know, I'm not too much. I'm just an IT person at that time, right? That's where I come from. So I started reading up on Peterson, and I figured, well, he says a lot of interesting stuff, and the way you're explaining me now about openness, being artists, well, that's me. Yeah, you know.
But that's why you're having these conversations too.
That's and I'm pretty, and I do have a little ego. I'm pretty good at it as well. So you can only do that if you're in sitting in the middle and accepting talks with everybody, including the fringes. But ever since I was at that event all these leftish people on the fringe are calling me extreme right because for even talking there or playing my left guitar songs there.
Mm-hmm. And this is part of the problem I noticed, is actually part of the reason that the right becomes further right, and this has, I think, been shown, is that the left tells them that if you disagree with my point of view, you're a fascist, you're a bigot.
There you go.
And so this is, I didn't talk about this too much so far, but I was extreme left myself. I became, when I was younger, I was overthrow capitalism and, Antifa and no fascists. And I was going to marches and rallies and all these things. And I became, probably the type of person that Jordan Peterson hates now, or discusses very strongly now. But I was, that kind of person, that my politics. And I started to feel very unsatisfied. Even when I was like living the revolutionary life of, I thought I was standing for saving the world through trying to do anti-capitalism and all this stuff, I really wasn't satisfied. And so when I came across, I started reading Nietzsche, Beyond Good and Evil, and that's how I first started to come across him, because I just sometimes when I read a book, I just type into YouTube just to see if some professors have done any lectures. And sometimes, some books will have 5-6 lectures from Yale or Georgetown. So sometimes I'm like, oh, this is free education from Georgetown University. Okay. Yeah. On YouTube. And anyway, so I read Beyond Good and Evil, and I was trying to think of why I'm not happy in this kind of, I was like you, I was searching for bigger ideas, and that's how I came across him. But yeah, so I think what he does, and I guess to get back to the other personality things, is that he shows that everyone is essentially human, and it understanding the big five personality gives you a way of communicating with someone you disagree with. Because now what I think puts me in a lucky position is I can talk to people on the right wing, and I have no problems with them. I can even understand why they feel their political views. And because I understand the big five personality, I can say, okay, I understand why you think that. I might disagree on the specifics, but your view isn't automatically you're a fascist or you're a bigot. It's more like, okay, I see why you feel that way, but maybe I agree, maybe I disagree. But it's a much better way to move forward. So the other ones, just for your interest quickly. So we said agreeableness, consciousness, openness.
Yeah.
Neuroticism, which sounds like a negative word, and it is, but it's how much you experience negative emotion. And this is what made Jordan Peterson so controversial, essentially, because this is something that usually differs between men and women, neuroticism. And so it's how quickly you experience negative emotion. And it's not to say that all women are neurotic, and maybe that's how people will perceive it, but it's the idea that because of evolutionary reasons, women have always had to raise children. They're more vulnerable. If I'm not talking about 200 years, I'm talking about millions of years throughout that history. Women, we only, we had infant mortality, or mothers dying in childbirth, still till very high numbers till 100 years ago, throughout the whole of humans. So women were very vulnerable, and so they are more likely, even evolutionary, to be worried about their surroundings. So if there is something that's not quite right, or if something is insecure in their life, they're more likely to feel worried about it. And that's what neuroticism is. But you see, this is evolutionary useful. It's not negative to have this quality, because it means that you're more likely to be concerned about the safety of your household, your children. It's the idea of protecting your.
Okay, cool. But how is that relevant? How would you use that in your day-to-day life then?
Well, the interesting thing about this theory has nothing to do with politics. He came to this conclusion this big five, independent of he was a psychoanalyst, and so he's coming to these ideas of just trying to understand the human being. So some of these don't relate exactly to politics, but
the reason that I'm asking you this, just to respond to that, is the way I look at the divide. There's many divides in people, left and right, or all those things. Let's talk male, female. For me, that's like there's certain traits on a scale, and you can be very masculine or you can be very feminine. But it doesn't. Your gender doesn't determine where you are on that line.
Yeah. So, I should be, I guess, a little bit clearer in my wording. Is that I'm saying, statistically speaking, everything, just to be clear. So I'm saying women are higher in neuroticism. Of course, there are some men that are higher than some women. I think I'm just saying on average, and just so people are aware.
Where that discussion sometimes goes, and that's why I'm.
And I think this is why he was controversial. But yeah.
Well, yeah, what you end up with if you're not thinking this thing through is that you would judge men or women differently because you feel, oh, you're female, so this would be your trait. No, that's not how that works.
No, exactly. You have to understand that every person can be anywhere on these scales. And
if that's your premise, then you can use that and assess that person and say, well, where are you on this scale or the other one? So you can make more easily an emotional connection with that person.
Okay. But yeah, I guess this is the thing that got him into trouble because firstly, he's on the very basic level, he's saying there's differences between men and women. And even saying something as biologically basic as this can be very controversial now, saying there are basic differences between men and women. And it shouldn't be a controversial thing to say, but
why would you deny that even? Yeah, exactly.
But you'll be actually, I mean, I don't know how aware of this you are, but personally, because maybe I'm slightly younger and I have a lot more interactions with people that are maybe early 20s, or I still go to nightclubs, I still go to the pub and do those kind of things.
Are you okay boomering me now, or
but
carry on.
I actually missed that whole joke thing. I didn't see what was going on, but I get the premise. But anyway, yeah, I have a lot of interactions with people that actually, or I see them, you can, it's very easy to identify now people that believe in certain ideologies because there's, they act in a very similar manner. But and this is again, I'm maybe prejudging people, which I shouldn't. But anyway, but there's a big number of people that will say, no, there are no differences between men and women, or that even the idea of having these categories is wrong in itself, and they'll say there are no men and women. This is a made-up human idea. And again, if you fail to understand that, and I went down this theory, and there's some people I'd like to talk to from philosophy that have done very interesting work about this. I don't know if you're aware of the grievance papers, but this is also very interesting. If scientists showed like the problems of trying to, essentially this idea of separating or saying men and women don't exist comes from the idea of postmodernism. And there's interesting philosophers that have challenged postmodernism in a very clever way. So that's another conversation for the future.
As a journalist, is this the avenue that you're trying to explore for yourself?
So I guess what I'm trying to do with the podcast is speak to people, and it's not just, obviously I have a big interest in foreign affairs, Syria, propaganda, and I plan on speaking to those people, but and this is why it was the candles thing I thought was symbolic too, because it's not, I didn't want it just to be journalists, I didn't want it just to be politicians, I want it to be voices of anyone that's on the fringes, fringes of society, the people that we've pushed away. And there's lots of people that have been pushed away that have, interesting ideas. Lots of journalists. Even yesterday, I had this email from someone that said, "Hi, I was a journalist in the 1980s for a big magazine. I had experienced a very similar thing to you. I quit for the same reasons. So, no one knows this person's story, I don't think. So, what I would like to do is have conversations with lots of different people that are on the fringes of society you wouldn't normally hear, and bring that story, hopefully, to the center of people's attention.
Excellent. So have you come up with a name already or not?
Yeah, well, I guess it's the first one. So I will, conversations, just very simple. And again, I don't want it to be political. I don't want it to be controversial. It's just conversations. It's going to be two people sitting down, talking human to human level. With
so you're not seeking politics, or you're not seeking controversy, whereas some people might. But you, at the same time, you're not afraid of it. So if what today is just common conversation might be a controversial topic.
Exactly.
In a couple of years from now.
Yeah, and I want to have conversations with friends.
Focus on the conversation. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Sounds like a plan.
That's the whole idea, and just have and I have business ideas, and I guess maybe I'll discuss this with you now, and it's going to be relevant. I also have. So what I would like to do is set this up as a social enterprise business. So instead of it's like being a business in my name, it will be a business with a charter of how it still aims to make a profit, but its founding principle is to contribute to like society in a positive way. And so it will have a registered set of things that the organization will do. And so there's things that I plan on doing around that in terms of just being transparent about all the different details, and I'm sure I'll go into detail with that more. So I want to have this as the conversations thing. I also want to set up a kind of a media specific company, and so I think conversations will sit under that as like the podcasts. But I want to essentially collaborate with as many different people as I can. And so I'd like to do a news site, but it's also has to be, I'm going to be very clear about the editorial policies. And I want very strong editorial policies. Obviously, I've discussed this a lot. I'm very aware of journalism ethics and some of the propaganda problems of journalism. So I'm going to, there's other documents that are available, maybe they need changing, but making like strong guidelines. Here in the UK, we have the Editor's Code of Conduct, which actually some places don't use. It's like an option because there's always been a problem of regulating the press. But so we have this organization in the UK called IPSO, the Independent Press Standards Organization or something like that. But it's something that newspapers voluntarily decide to adopt because it's to get away from the problem. It's not the government saying you have to follow this rule because of freedom of speech issues, but it's saying we as a group collectively say we're going to follow these rules. So, I'd like to follow those rules specifically and maybe other things to make sure the organization is stronger. And then, things to do about freedom of speech issues and have many, many big plans. But I'd like to get back to you. So maybe let's discuss the actual New Year's Eve podcast itself. So who are some of the people that you had, even though we've discussed a few?
Yeah, no, well, I started making these podcasts after the Diada, that event on September 11, 2018 in Catalonia in Spain. But I really started this podcast as a separate entity December 20th, 2018. Mm-hmm. So one of the first guests that I had on, I didn't even have the light and didn't have the new camera, was Thomas Drake, the original NSA whistleblower. Mm-hmm. So he was very cool, and I think that interview still only has like 100 or 200 views.
Really? Yeah. I'll watch it and share. And
yeah, so that's the tedious bit of this. How do you get it bigger? And I suck at marketing, so.
Well, we can talk a little bit after we stop recording. I have I want to share with you some ideas I have, and hopefully it can be a way that everyone that's doing podcasts can can grow.
Yeah, I need that.
And I have some interesting ideas.
Okay. So, but I talked to Thomas Drake, and then shortly after John Kiriakou. Now I met a whistleblower of European Union who stopped child trafficking from Romania to abroad. And actually there's big institutional bankers, François de Combray, a French banker, who lobbied actively to keep that inter-country adoption going, while she, from the European Union, was working to stop inter-country adoption because basically it's selling kids to abroad for $40,000. Now she ended up fixing that system, gaining that kind of oppression, and then she ended as a whistleblower there. And she's still living in hiding somewhere in the Netherlands, and she was on my show. So those people that actually dare stick out their neck and come up and make an argument for what's right, I asked them, and they said, yeah. Now, another one was Reality Winner. We talked about that earlier. She's in prison, and she's the first major whistleblower case under Trump. Now she's in jail with the longest sentence ever on the Espionage Act in the United States. So I wanted to learn, why is she in jail longer than Thomas Drake or John Kiriakou ever was? What's changed? Now, and I talked to her sister. Now, Brittany Winner, that's her sister, relayed that story of her sister and how she was arrested and how she was interrogated by FBI. That interrogation was actually put into a play. So there's a play.
I saw the interview. It was a really nice interview. Very.
So what I did is I just oh, there's a play. So who's directing that then? And I found Tina Setter, and I reached out through Twitter or email, I don't know. And she said, yeah, I'll be on the show.
That's great.
So that's what I did as of mid-December, connecting to all these people. And I reached out to, I don't know, 100 or so of them, and some 20 accepted. And I decided, well, let's see if I can make a 5.5 hour podcast. And I pulled it off. They all said yes. So, but that's what you do, Tareq. You just ask them. And I also asked Snowden. I wanted him on, but he didn't respond. And I asked the Dutch envoy, not for this podcast, but to OPCW. I want to know what's going on inside OPCW. So let's interview the guys.
I think we'll keep pushing. We'll get them.
We'll get them. And if they decline, well, that's fine. But if they decline, well, let's expose that then. Information will want to be free. Transparency will win. I mean,
and I think that's what we're going to do with these. For sure. And so, what was your? It was like 5.5 hours. I remember we spoke. Maybe you'd done maybe 2 hours already or something like that, and you were already like, "Whew, that was amazing." So, what was your whole experience of the whole 5.5 hours?
We're going now already for over hour with you. Yeah, you see that in your tool. Hour 20 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Are you tired? I'm just having a friendly conversation. If I meet you, if I go to London, and if we go to support Assange near Belmarsh prison, we'll end up in a pub and we'll have this kind of discussions, and that doesn't tire you.
No.
I thoroughly enjoy talking like this, and that doesn't wear me out.
Yeah.
What was stressing is, it's recorded live. So I made a schedule. Say, well, I'm going to call you then. I'm going to call you then. So I needed 20 conversations to be timed, and I pulled it off. But that's impossible, really.
Oh, that's amazing! But well done.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun, and I ended up with a bunch of Dutch guys on the couch at the end. So we had I want to call it fireside conversation, but that's what Roosevelt did back in the day. He used that term, and I feel if a president does this, there must be some level of propaganda in that. So I decided not to do
bad juju.
Yeah. So I decided not to call it fireside conversation, but that's what it is. I have a glass of good whiskey, sit near the fireside, and chat about worldly affairs.
Yeah. And did you watch like the podcast as it was being streamed on New Year's Eve?
Oh yeah. Well, I recorded it in 3 parts because I didn't trust technology. So if I screw up somewhere, at least I'll not have destroyed the entire file. But I streamed it myself, and I was watching it on a TV. So I don't know your family situation, but I have a wife and 2 kids. And when I got married, I was just this boring IT person. Now I'm probably still boring, but I have a totally new line of work. And they didn't, at least the kids went, oh, what are we going to do on TV? and I also made them not use YouTube for that night because I needed bandwidth. So it must put a little load on the family. But what I did on New Year's Eve was just stream it and watch it there. And that's the first time I saw it. And I listened to it again, walking the dog yesterday and day before. And it's actually pretty good. Most of it is pretty good. I'm very proud of the outcome.
So let me tell you a little bit about my experience of watching it. So we filmed on the 30th.
Yeah.
I had some time on the 31st. I was going to see some friends in the evening. I decided to watch as much of it as I could. Selfishly, I watched the bit with myself, of course, but I also watched the parts with John Kiriakou, which again were amazing to me. Even just hearing him say the words of, I'm a whistleblower and I have to always keep speaking about this, the conversation that he had with his wife. I was, that touched, a part of me saying, I have to keep speaking about this all the time and get other people to keep speaking as well. The conversation with Brittany Winner, I should say, also fascinating. And I was also one of those people that didn't know as much as I should about this, but it's difficult with so much.
It's not in the news. So I would bitch to guys like you also. Why wasn't it in Newsweek more then?
Yeah.
So, but it is suppressed. That's what they say, that you're opposed in the court of public opinion. That's what all these whistleblowers say. That's why I talked to Bailey Lemon also, activist from Canada, actually heir to the Pirate Party International currently. And we're writing a book together. We call it the Book of Courage, and it's going to contain chapters of these guys. The chapter of Thomas Drake, chapter of John Kiriakou, chapter of Willie Post, chapter about Reality Winner, chapter on journalism, chapter on responsible disclosure. I remember where my brain was shutting down earlier, and I talked about Chelsea Manning. What I wanted to say is when Chelsea Manning volunteered that information to WikiLeaks, that made some people at different places in the world decide to come up with proper software.
Yes.
So we have Global Leaks, and we have the other one that's popular in the United States. I don't know it by heart. But Global Leaks as a software tool is now turned into Publix, which started from the Netherlands by Teun Gauthier. I'm going to talk to the director of Publix shortly. I'm going to interview him. So that's the cool stuff that came out of Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange disclosing the war crimes of the United States in Iraq. So now we have an infrastructure through which you can, on a safe way, disclose information. And also in the Netherlands, we have the House of Whistleblowers. Well, that's organized by our government, and members of the Secret Service in the Netherlands are actually in that thing. So nobody trusts it, but it is portrayed as a state-sponsored way to volunteer your whistleblowing. So I'm going to do a debate about that with Café Weltsmets. Café Weltsmets is the other one I do interviews for. And in the new year, they're going to do interviews with an audience in The Hague, overlooking our parliament. We're going to dissect that House of Whistleblowers thing that failed. We're going to talk about the other initiatives that are crowdsourced, like Publix, that are actually working. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's great.
And thank you for making me remember where I left off halfway this talk.
No, that fits in perfectly because, I think the whole idea is that this has a domino effect of people will continue to speak the truth. And so I watched the podcast on New Year's Eve, after I watched it, I was feeling very, very, very positive. And I was, went to meet my friends, and it was so strange because my plans changed and things got changed last minute. The next thing I know, I end up at an old friend's house that I've known for about 15 years or something, and he was Dutch. And I was like, oh, what a coincidence. I just, was watching this, I was like, oh, this is too good to be true. And, we had this, I remember while I was watching the podcast, this is the feeling that I had. I was on Twitter and I was looking at the trends on the side. I've got a picture of New Year's Eve, but you see, it was like George Orwell in my mind exactly. The trending was Happy New Year, Death to America, at the same time. And it was like, this like, yay, and like really negative image at the same time. And this was like the feeling of New Year for me, of like, there is, the Happy New Year is always like this spark of optimism in a dark time. And, just like the candle experience of like, okay, we're going to start speaking the truth. It was
so
from there.
maybe if we go to an end of this conversation, let me do an anecdote about when I started to politics. We had elected our front runner at the time, and Ancilla van der Leest became our front runner. And one of the first conversations I had with her, I asked, okay, so what? And I decided to make a song about that. So I was musician at the time, so I thought, well, if I'm going to do politics, I'm going to write a song. So I needed inspiration, and I asked her, why do you do this? Why do you do this? For her, bottom line was, well, it's a end of the day, it's an easy choice. It's either love or fear. We did some philosophy earlier in this conversation, and you mentioned Peterson. Everybody's doing philosophy now, so it's an easy choice. Are we going to do Happy New Year? Are we going to do Death to America? Are we going to do the candle part? Or are we going to do the gun part? Let's choose love over fear and see where we end up. And we are all afraid, and people are shooting, and people are screaming at each other. Well, I'm with her. I'm with the candle approach. Let's choose love. See what happens.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great way to end it there. And hopefully more people will decide to take the same approach. And hopefully I'll give some more information about this conversations thing that I'm doing. It's like I said, it's not going to be something about me. It's what I'm hoping is to build a platform for many people to use through podcasts.
So I'm volunteering something to you now. So I'm annoyed like you are. I mean, you were annoyed with Newsweek. That's why you left. I don't think it's a rage quit, but you quit and you were angry. I'm angry at mainstream media. That's why I'm doing the podcast. I mean, if what I'm doing here was on TV, I probably wouldn't be doing it. So mainstream media is giving me an itch on an uncomfortable place. So I thought MSM, mainstream media, that's not functioning. Let's change that abbreviation then. Let's change it from mainstream media to many-stream media. And I registered that thing. So if you want to use many-stream media, I'm still looking for a purpose to that.
Okay.
Cool. That's what it is. Yep.
Sure. Okay. Well, the idea that I had as well for the podcast is, so under this label of conversations, I would have a channel that would release this, but also what I would want to do is that, so I will have my own channel and I will release under my name this podcast. But also what I would like to do is that and this is a model that I want people to use in the future, is the guest also receives a copy of the podcast and they put it on their channel. And it's like everyone can benefit. So there's 3 separate, because I don't want all the conversations to be had with me. I want to be doing many things. I want to be writing. I want to be doing things. So what people can do is they can have their own YouTube channel and they will say, okay, I'm having a conversation with somebody, and they will both profit essentially from having that conversation. And they, so they can host it with me on our channel if they want. If they want to just do it by themselves, they can do it by themselves. But that's the model, is 3 different people will have copies of it. At the moment, 2 of those people are me because I'm Conversations and Tareq. But so I guess in the beginning, while I'm building, I'm receiving 2 of the thirds of the the benefits of it. But in the future, I will maybe receive a third. If the interviewer receives a third, and the guest will receive a third.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, and we put it out there, and it also gets around the problem of some censorship issues. It's on 3 different platforms. If you follow, and it's a way of, if you follow one person, you can be direct to interesting ideas from another person, and hopefully it's like a connected web of ideas will start to build through this. So that's the plan. Big ambitions, but I already have things in the motion to achieve that.
Last example then. So, conversations of truth. So were you drunk at the time when you came up with this, or?
No, I was
Other substances? No, this was just a sober thought.
sober. Yeah, I mean,
okay, hang on. So I don't know if Rick Falkfinger was under the influence of whatever it was, but he came up with Pirate Party on January 1st. So I don't know what he was doing on a December 31st night when he came up with it. Totally annoyed by the copyright industry, and he said, "Well, if I'm a pirate, I'm going to start Pirate Party." So maybe the good ideas actually start right around New Year's Eve.
Hopefully, and this is actually the funny thing is it's very strange. I had a very strange, like almost a religious experience around like the New Year's Eve when I went to my friends. We started listening to music, eating, and blah blah. And like when it was the countdown, it was like, I really it felt like a community spirit of like, oh, we had this, because we started completely accidentally. We started like singing together, and like it felt like we were a group of people that. And there was like, I spoke to different friends. I had like musicians there and people that are interested in different arts, and they all had their own like spark of something that they were positive about for the future. And then we came together and we had this like really nice communal experience, and so that's why it was so positive. And then we had the countdown 10-9, and it was just like when we all hugged everyone. Everyone, it felt like a exchange of emotions with everyone that I was like, this is like very, very strong. And because, just to put this in perspective, the last 10 New Years I've had, I haven't really been with friends, or I've been working, or I traveled away with family or something. I never actually haven't had a New Year's Eve for a very long time with people. So it was like my first time, I mean, in this whole crisis of what's going on, and having that experience. And it was like, so the whole symbolism of everything and the connections of everything seemed very, very fitting to do it around this theme of the candle, the single light in the darkness around New Year's. And hopefully the candles will spread.
Oh yeah, well, it's stronger than the bullets flying currently in Iraq. So
yeah,
cool, excellent. Thank you
you so much. And if you come to London, I'll be more than happy to hang out, and we'll go to a pub.
Thank you, Tareq.